make our own custom directory for that. Along the way, we'll see if we can create 2 new feature modules like we talked about in the last video for partials and books, but also we want to be this part, and what we want, we're going to organization. All right, let's get to it. Lots to do this time around. So first things first, we're going to change our bookstore component.html. So far we have just this part. And what we want inside here is not just authors and books, but also we want to be able to, in our books area, what we want to do is, this can stay the same, the authors, but what we want is for the books to be listed inside of a ng4. Now this is the first time you've seen this, so let's do it from scratch. So again, what we want is a div tag with a class of column-9-p-2. Inside that, we're going to have a div, and let's just do it right. Okay. The div tag is going to have a, actually let's undo that, change. We're going to have a div with a class of card. That's what it's going to be. So card is going to look very nice. I was putting in some other classes for styling, right? So, okay, so that's margin and padding. We're going to have some margin and padding of 1em. That's what it does. And then what we're going to do is we can always undo, and we can put in an h4 tag where we're going to have our product name that's going to loop in a second. And inside of our h4 tag, we're also going to have a span with a class of badge pill, and then badge primary. And we're going to make it float to the right. Okay, so that's kind of our classes that we're going to have. So that is going to be inside of our h4 tag. I'm just going to put that in there and just separate it down to prepare for us to inject all the data that we need in here. Okay, finally, I think we got almost everything. We need underneath the h4 tag a div with a class of card-text and background white and padding of 1. And that's what there's going to go. Now we have to just put the data in there. Okay, so we don't need this little space. We can put that back up there. So this card that we're going to put in, which is, first of all, column 9, we're going to have a card that is going to be created for each of our books, right? A card is just a style. So if you look at, again, getbootstrap.com, and if you look at documentation, and if you go to components, there is a card component, which kind of looks like this. This is kind of the way a card can look, almost like a little list of items. And depending on how you format the card, you can add additional things like headers and footers. You can add in, like, for example, something that looks like this, where you have the header and then you have some additional data. So that's what the card style does. But what we want to do is we want to create a card for each book in books. So the way to do that for each of these cards is, before the div, we put a star ng4. Okay, so ng4 says we're going to create a let book of books, right? For every book of books, right? We're going to do this loop. Okay, that's what this ng4 does for every book of books, right? So it's like a for each loop. That's what this thing does. For each book in books, it's going to loop through and create a little card for each of the books. What we want to do is where it says, did I miss something? Column 3 authors. And then inside of our H4 tag, we're going to have our book. So we're going to, again, we're going to use the mustaches. We're going to say book dot name is what we want. So for the book name, for every book in books, we're going to put the book name in there first, followed by the book price, which is inside of our span, right? So again, it's going to be the book dot price. And what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that the currency, okay, and it says here USD. We're going to keep with USD for now. We're going to explore later on if we can use other kind of currency and how that looks like. Symbol, it's just a $ symbol is what it does. And the 2.2-2, this is the filtering, okay, which is basically going to create how many precision decimals we're gonna allow, as well as a style for the actual number itself. That's what this does. Okay, so that's the span, and then finally, instead of our card text, we're gonna put our I should say book. We're going to try and put our book, our description. We'll see how that looks, because this might not be okay. So again, we need to use double the mustaches for this, book dot description. Now, warning, these mustaches, what they really do, these double curly braces, it's like I want to inject information in here, inject the author's length, inject the book name, inject the book price, inject the description right in here. This is similar to doing less percentage equals percentage, this kind of syntax in our Express application. That's what it's like, okay? Where we inject data inside there. Okay, cool. So that's what this does. And if we just stop there, let's see what we get. And there's no functionality yet. But what we get is, if I go to the bookstore, you get a bunch of books, as an example. And they're laid out like this. 4 authors. The authors aren't really kind of laid out properly. This is just showing the 4 authors, the numbers, and then followed by a bunch of books. And that's what we should have at this point. And they're all $10 because that's what we made them. Now notice that the book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, all that stuff is white, and this is something we may have to come back and modify. And I'm just going to check the styling, because the card itself is background light, as an example. Text white, which is something that we're using. Card text white. That's why it looks the way it does. Well, it may have to come back there and change the style, because we've also changed some stuff later on. But this is the beginning. So what it does now, it kind of lays out everything in this long format. Also notice that we have a bit of a scroll bar happening, and at the bottom, it looks like we're going beyond the bottom of the, because we added this additional piece in here, which is the CSS. We may have to add some CSS to give a bit more padding on the bottom of our page to allow for this bottom bar, which Angular doesn't know about. Okay, and that's why we have one of our book items hidden by this book, nav bar at the bottom. Okay. All right, so cool. So that's this part that we've got going on. That's the first part, and we want to have that listed properly. But one thing we note is that our background white and the card text that we're using is causing us a bit of a problem for and the book description is not really coming out too. Let's go back into that. So notice that the book description is description 4. That's where the description is going to be, short description 4. All right, and it's on white. This says text white. If we said card text, right, that's what that is. Book is card text. And you can see that up here, where we get to our float right, this is all good and everything else, but our background light, right, is one thing that we've been using through this entire time. So this is something where we can change our styling, and I'm just going to go back up and make sure that we've got everything going, because we may have missed something on this background. And then what we had is a author's length. So that's this. And one thing they changed is column 3, background info, P2, and then text white. Okay, text white. And what that does is, what it changes is this, text white. Okay. And we can change the text for each of the products if you want to, because now we have a card, and this is the problem right here. This is our little issue, M1-P1. So that is, let's refresh that. Okay. Badge pill, badge primary, float right. That is this part. That's the badge. And that makes it look like it's a little pill. That's what that is for currency, for what this is. So what we need here is background light, but we can go text black if we really want to. So text black. Let's see how that looks. And if it actually does anything, right? Because that's where the styling is. So text white. What we can also try is text black here. If that's even a thing. I don't think so. And I'm just trying to look at the styling to see where we're getting that issue. Text white. I don't think that belongs there. Sorry, I just want to make sure that I want to have the stuff look proper. So column 9, P2, NG for books of books, card, M1, P1, background light. That looks good. Book of books, background light. We get the book name, and then the class badge pill. Let's make background dark for a second. I'm just curious and see what that would actually do. Okay, that's not terrible for this, but it's not what we wanted. And I think we're inheriting inside of this div tag text white. Oh, this what's happened. Yeah, see. All right, so this is going to override. This is what's overriding our style right here. That's what's happening. So we can background light. We'll go back to background light for a second because I think that might look better at the end. Yeah, there we go. So that's what it is. Okay, so that's the problem with that. So that gives us a big long list, and you can see that each of them are cards separated by little spaces. Again, not sure if I'm fond of the long format. I think we may have to space this out a little better and make it look nicer. This doesn't look bad, but this looks pretty long. Okay. Next. Let's get into the next part, which is what we want to do. By the way, the other thing to do here, if you don't like this style, and I'm not sure I'm fond of it, is instead of container fluid, you can always use container, which actually makes it a little bit narrower, or if you like that kind of style. So notice that you get margin on the left and the right now, as opposed to it being right up against the edge. That's what container fluid does. So I'm going to leave it as is because we're going to kind of go in there and fix it later. Okay. The next part is we want to be able to add category selection on here on the left. So let's get back into that and change those things. So going back to this, we want to go into the bookstore component.ts in here. And we have a couple things inside of our bookstore component class up here. We can add in a public selected author, which we can set to null. All right. So now by chance, if you look at selected author, it's of type any. This is not great, but we can fix it later. And then what we say is when we get books, right, we want to return the repository books by get books and then we want to pass in, because remember, Get Books has an option for it to pass in an author, the selected author, this dot selected author. We want to pass that in. So that's the option. And then what we want to do is we have this, we want to change the author, okay, where we have our new author that we're going to kind of take in, which is a string type. We're going to return void on this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that this dot selected author is equal to the new author, whatever the new author is. So that is the option for us to select an author. Okay. So that sets it up, but we need to enable it. And the way to do that is to modify our HTML once more. So we're going to go back into HTML, and we have a this part here is the ng4. The ng4 selects the the book. That's what it does. We're not going to change that, but inside of the author selection, so that's up here. Let's make some space. In the author selection area, where we have this text white, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the text white, which I thought we were going to do anyway. I thought that was really weird. And under, instead of placing the authors in here, right, what we're going to do instead is we're going to add I'm going to push this down a little bit. We're going to add a button. And the button is going to have a class of button, button block, and then button dash outline dash primary. So it's going to be a button that has kind of looking like an outline, right? And what we're going to do with this is we're going to add a click event. And the way the click events look, it's kind of inline. We're going to say when someone clicks on this, we're going to activate the change author. Okay, that's what's going to happen. So we're going to change the author based on whatever the author that was clicked, and we're going to put in the kind of the all authors as one for the button. So that's what's going to happen there. And the next button, we're going to make another button. And the button is going to be with a class of button dash outline primary dot button block, right? Okay, so that is this part. And what we're going to say is, in the button itself, first put the class in the next line just to make it easier. We're going to say that ng4 equals to, and then we're going to say let author of authors, for every author of authors, right? We're going to make a button for every author of authors, and we're going to say that the class dash dot active, the active one, is equal to the author that is equal to the selected author, right? The selected author. And when someone clicks on this thing, this is kind of interesting, these click directives, we can change the category, change the author to the author that we're going to pass in. That's what this does. And we're going to display the author. For every author, we're going to display that author in the button. The button text is going to be the author that we're displaying. Let's just space this over a little bit because that's what we're doing. Okay. And we're not going to display the length of authors anymore. We don't need this anymore, so we can get rid of it. Okay. That's the other part. So there's two parts. We're going to have a button for each author on the left, and we're going to have books for each author on the right. Okay. There's still no filtering done. This is just selecting or displaying the buttons. So if I go back to this now, you're going to see that we have some errors we got to fix in a second. But this is pretty cool. We have the all authors button plus a bunch of this. Okay, let's see how this works. Let's see where we messed up. Class button. Oh, yeah, there it is right there. Class button, button block, button outline primary. I think that's where the issue was. And let's see how that looks. All authors. Okay. Button outline primary. Class of 3. And instead of using background info, we're going to just do a PF2. So a padding of 2. So just regular background like this. And then I know we messed up. This part here is going to be at the end of the, so this part is actually included here, and that's why we have a problem. And then that is going to look nice. Author 1, author 2, and it does already starting to filter, as you can see, all the authors by me pressing the author that I want to filter. So all authors, I can look at all of them, and I can look at 1, 2, 3, 4, all those authors there. So this is kind of the functionality we want inside of our mock data. Again, notice that there's no data here, and this is good because what this is doing is it's allowing us to create our layout, see it, test it, see if we like it, and if we do, keep it. If not, modify it. All right, so that's the first part. And that allows us to look at all the authors separately. Now what we want to do is we want to add pagination at this point, because if you notice over here, if I go to all authors, that's pretty long. We never want this many authors at the same time because it'll be too long for the page. So let's add some pagination. And to do that, we're going to go back into our bookstore component, which is this. And in our bookstore component right now, we have our selected category, or selected author in this case. But we're also going to do 2 more public. We're going to say books per page, which we're going to say maximum books is 4. That's probably enough. And we're also going to say our selected page is going to be equal to 1. So the first page is going to be the one selected. All right, next, in our get products, which is get books in this case, we're going to do some other funky stuff where on the top we're going to say that const page index is equal to this dot selected page, so whatever page we've selected, minus 1. So we're going to get the thing. They multiply by this dot products per page, or books per page is what we're going to have in this case. And we're going to return something different. This dot repository dot get books with a selected author, right? But we're going to slice. We're going to remove. That's what slice does. By starting from page index to page index plus this dot books per page. So what this is going to do is basically subtract books we can see by the number of books we can see in one page. All right, so that's 1. Get books, or get authors and change author, we're not going to modify, but we're also going to add a couple more methods, like in the PowerPoint. We're going to change page. We're going to put in our new page, which is a number, which is returning void. And we're going to say that this dot selected page is equal to new page. Okay, so we're setting up our back end again. This is our code behind file, which is what this is really the controller for the page, right? And then we're going to change page size, new size, which is, you can guess what it's going to be, a number, which is return void. And if you follow the PowerPoint presentation, we're just modifying what we have to put the books. So books per page, right, as an example, is equal to, we're going to cast it now. That's what this number is, new size. So we're going to say, hey, we're going to get this thing, and we're going to make it into the books per page, casting it as a number. And this change page to 1. Okay, so this is, change page itself, which is this number. We're going to say the selected page to the first page of the number of pages. Okay, cool. And then finally, we're going to say that we're going to make a getter, page numbers. And the getter is going to return a number. This is where we're going to replace with our custom directive later on. Where we're going to return an array of, this is why we want to get rid of this, because it's so ugly looking. Ceiling and this dot repository as an example, and then dot get books, right? And this dot selected author, right? Dot length. See how ugly that is, right? Divided by this dot books per page, right? Which is going to provide a number that we're going to fill with zeros, and we're going to create a map of each of those numbers. We're just going to call those numbers x. For every x, we're going to have an I. We're going to add the page plus 1. So basically what we're doing is we're just creating pagination numbers. And that's why this is so convoluted. When you look at it, you're like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a custom directive here to make this look nicer? And that's what we're going to add. Okay, cool. So that should give us some. But in order for us to make this work, we need to change it to add, and that's what this map fill 0 and map does, right? Now, what we need to do is we need to modify the HTML again. And so here what we have is our product description, which is, we have a div tag and we have another div tag here. And what we want is, we want to add in, so let me just put in the product description and what it should look like. It should probably look like this. So let's put the product description like that. So here's the product description, and we have another div tag under the product description, and underneath that div tag, we're going to be inside of the, again, the book area, not the author area. That's what these two things are. So this is here, this is kind of the authors. And over here, this area here is books. Okay, so all the books, we want to filter by author. That's what we're doing. And so in here, we're going to make a div with the class of form inline. And then float left with a margin right of 1. And then inside that, we want a selector with a class of form control. And inside that, we want an option with multiplied by 4, let's say, multiplied by 4. And I think that'll do what I want it to do, right? Yeah, it'll do that nicely. So that's kind of, again, we're using Emmet to help us out with all that stuff because it makes it so much easier for us to do this. So again, let's make some changes. So this is good. When we get to the selector, which is basically a drop down, we're going to say that the class is form control. The ID we don't really care about, nor do we care about the name. We don't care about this stuff. But what we do care about is for every value. So that what we're going to say is, for every value, right, we are going to start off with books per page. All right, that's what that, remember the books per page is a getter. So we're going to get a value for a number for the books per page. Actually, if you hover over, it tells you that. And then we want to add also in there on change. We're going to make a new event inline where we can say after the change event is triggered, we want to change per page, change page size. There we go. This is interesting. We're going to use an event trigger, where we're going to change where the trigger is the target value. So whatever the target value is we're going to take that target value. When we change it, we're going to use this inside of our value. So the value is going to be 3, 4, 6, and 8. That's going to be the numbers we're going to display. How many pages? So 3 per page is going to be the option. I'm just going to copy paste that. 4, 6, 8. Okay, 8 per page and so on. And that should probably close off before we kill it, like the way we just did. 8 per page. Probably don't want to do that. 8 per page is going to be this. Wow, love this. Let's just kill this thing and just copy it again. Who knows what happened there? 8, and then 8 per. We may adjust it down from 8 per page. That might be too long. 4 per page, 6 per page, no problem. 8 per page, I don't know. Okay, so that's the selector for how many books per page. And now we want to also have a div tag with a class of button-group, and then float right. Inside that, we want to have a button with a class of button-outline primary. So an outline of primary button. And then what we want to do is let's put this button inside here. And the div tag can close off this. There we go. I think this is looking pretty good. And now we're going to put for every page. So we're going to say ng4 4 equals to let page of page numbers. So for every page and page numbers, we want to, which I'll put down on the next page, we want to, with a click event, we're going to say that when someone clicks on the button, we want to call the change page method and pass in the page that we're clicking on. So which page do we want to look at? Okay. And then what we want to say is the class.active is equal to the page which is equal to the selected page. Selected page. Right. And that would close off the button, which not here, but actually is there. That should do what we want. And inside that, we want to actually type in the page that we're looking for. So for every page, we want to print out the page in this little square, which is what this is going to do for us. Whew. Right now it looks complex, but actually we're just making a for loop for every page in the page numbers. Right? That's what we're going to have. So we have, however many pages we have. Okay. Again, that's why we need a nice custom directive would make this a lot easier to look at. I think that would be good. Now, don't know, but we might have another one. Let's see how it goes with this custom element. We'll go through this and check. All right, so what does this look like now? All right, cool. So we have how many per page? We want to have 3 per page. It changes to 3, which now it divides how many pages we have. We can go to page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. Kind of a cool way of doing it. This comes right from Bootstrap, by the way. And if I go 8 per page, that's still okay. We can still see it okay right now, but with a very short description. And I think we're going to have a problem when our descriptions are a little longer than the short description that we have here. So 8 per page might be a little long. We may have to come back and change that, but we can see we have 2 pages of 8 per page. And we can come back there and change that number as we go. All right, so that is pagination. I think we've done some pretty good work here in terms of that. Now, it'd be nice if we used a custom directive because we don't have to generate an array full of numbers to create the page navigation buttons. That's pretty crazy, right? An array for that. Like I said, and it's pretty ugly looking, the syntax. And we're talking about this thing right here, this weird, funky stuff that we have going on there. So how do we do that? We want to make another custom directive inside the bookstore folder. So we're going to do up here, we're going to make a new file, and we're going to call this counter.directive. We could also generate this automatically, .ts. And the counter directive, we're going to import the directive. A directive, we're also going to have a view container reference, as well as a template reference, and an input and an attribute. All this stuff comes with the directive, by the way. And simple changes. These are all things that come from at Angular core. Whew. All right, so that's this part. That's the import that we need, the only one we need. Well, then we can say at directive. So we're going to kind of create a directive. That's what we're going to decorate. This is the decorator we're going to use. We're going to say the selector is a new custom selector that we're going to make, which we're going to use a selector called counter of. All right, that's what the selector is going to look like. And then we're going to make a new class called counter directive. And this counter directive class is going to have a constructor. And the constructor is going to have two things: a private container of type view container ref, and we're going to talk about that in a second, and as well as a private template, which is going to be of a template reference. These are just references, which is of type any. What does that? Type any, and what this does for us is it creates a. Let's make this over here. What this creates is a way of passing in a container and a template for each of these counted out. Now notice it gives us this really funky warning. It says, warning, this selector should be prefixed by ep. We're not going to do that. We're going to accept what we have in the PowerPoint. So we're going to say disable that rule. We don't care about that. We can do that for all the linting that it comes with. And then we can say that, all right, we want to make a at input counter of. All right, so that is an input decorator. And when we're looking at we're going to make a new variable called counter of type number. All right. And that should be definitely not in here, but rather it should be outside of the constructor. Let me just make sure. Actually, the constructor, I believe, should be empty in this case. Yes, it should be empty like this. And we'll put this can be put anywhere, by the way, but it's in the book, it's showing us that to do it this way. I'm fine with that. All this is doing is it's creating a new variable, and we're marking it as an input of type counter of. All right, that's what it's going to be. That's what we're going to make. Now we're going to say ng on changes. So when the changes, we have our simple changes. We're going to return void with this one. This is actually something we have to do because we are implementing this directive. So we need to have this in there. And we're going to say this.container.clear. We're going to clear the container. And we're going to say for let, actually let's use a for loop like this. For let I, sure, we don't mind doing I, is equal to 0. Actually, let's undo that. Let's say let index is this this dot counter. If index is less than this dot counter, that's what's happening there. Then we want to index plus plus, and we're going to say in here that we're going to say that this dot container. What happened there? This dot container dot create embedded view. This dot template and new counter directive context with index plus 1. Whew. Now, We don't have counter-directive context yet. We will. So what we're going to do here is outside of ng on changes, we are going to make a new class, actually outside of the class. And I'm not really fond of this, to be honest, this structure, to make a new class called counter-directive context. I'm not really fond of doing a class within a class, to be honest. But you know what? It's kind of okay to do this. You could definitely make a separate file for this, but there's only a constructor that takes in public and implicit any. So a counter-directive context takes anything. It is an object. And let's just fix up all these quick fixes that we need to. Say quick fix, we should do all the TS features. Now, what is complaining about this one? It says lifecycle interface on change should be implemented for method ng on changes. And did we not implement that? On changes. Yes. So what it's asking us for us to do is it wants us to implement, because this is fine, but it's saying that we should implement the on changes interface for us to support on changes. So what it's saying is go into the class. This is not in the book, and it's saying implement on changes, right? I think, is it on changes that it's looking for? On changes. Or ng on changes. What does it look? What does it want? Sorry, I just want to make sure it's there. On changes. Oh, capital O. Implements on changes. But I don't see that that is even a thing unless can we fix it? Is there a fix on change? I don't think that simple changes. Make sure that I have everything here. View container ref, template ref inputs. Pretty sure you need to do that, but yeah, no, that's not it. You should look that up, because that says quick fix. Use lifecycle interface. No, I don't like that rule. That's not a great fix for us to do. Lifecycle on change to implement method ng on change. Okay, that's the one. Ng on changes. Implements ng on changes. I don't think so. That doesn't make sense either. I'm going to leave that alone. I think there's something that we're missing here. Just to get rid of that. I hate those warnings. That's like us not doing something correct, to be honest with you. On change, it says interface on changes, and it says go to Angular style guide and use lifecycle interface. So we'll look that up. So it says interface on changes. Let's see if that we can find that and fix that. So implement interface on changes Angular. Is there such a thing? Changes. Here's an example of a class that implements on it. Okay, but oh, see, it's not. Okay, so that's one thing we're missing. On changes, but that means that simple changes. Okay, so that means this on changes. Oh, so we're missing actually a declaration up here. Now we should be able to do that no problem, and it shouldn't screw us up. Implements on changes. Yeah, that looks like it takes away the error. Okay, there we go. So again, I'm not fond of warnings. Usually warnings mean something, and I don't want to ignore them. So even if it's not in the book, it doesn't matter to me. I like to fix it up, and I fixed up a bunch of stuff that's not in the book that I'm using. All right, cool. So that is this, which is our custom directive, but we need to use it. So the way to use that is in the store module, which is this one. we want to change some of our declarations. So we want to include the, under the bookstore component, we want to use the, we want to import the counter directive. Just want to grab this, put it here. We want to use the counter directive, and in order for us to use that, it's going to import, but we want to declare the counter directive in here. So counter directive, and we also want to export it. I want to export this, and that's not in the book, but I like to export it, import and export. So it's going to pass through basically this whole module. And after we've done that, then we can go back into the component.html, and where we have our button ng4, like page of page numbers, blah, 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 we're going to make this even simpler, and we're going to change this part right here. Instead of using an ng4, we're going to make it so that it's going to use a custom directive. We want to say that counter is equal to let page of page count, right? And page count does not compute. But counter. And what we need to do is, I would like to do this differently. But more or less, what we need to do is go back into the page component or the bookstore component at the bottom, and where we have page count or page numbers, we have page size. We're going to add a new getter called page count, which is a number, and we're going to return some parts of what we see down there, math.ceiling, and this dot repository, then get books, and this dot selected author that we're going to pass in there, dot length. All right, so we're going to break this down, divided by this dot products, books per page. All right, so that is going to, what that's going to do is going to return the number of pages, page count. Right, so it's going to calculate this for us. And once we have this, then we don't need this anymore, because this calculates everything. We're going to get the page count, and from this, we don't need to have this ugly stuff here, right? This ugly stuff does not compute, right? Remember I told you this is easier to look at than this. Instead of making an array now, if we go back to our bookstore, we're going to say, so cool, let's make a counter. And we're going to use the counter directive, right? For every counter, we're going to say let page of page count. Now look, when we say let, it says that it does not define an implicit value if the context type is based on type any, or consider refining it to the more specific type. I recommend it because what's happening is that the counter directive is saying there were implicit any, but this could be of type number. Let's see if that works instead of an implicit page count. So if we go back to this, does it still give me the error? And it says counter directive does not define an implicit value. I thought we did that just now. Oh wait, bookstore component.html. Yeah, it's still not liking that. And is there a fix? There's no quick fix for that. Let's go back to this counter directive and undo that change. That should work. Let's see if it actually works now with this. Let's get back into this and then refresh, and we should have our same, nothing's changed, but now we have a much simpler syntax than what we had before, right? Much simpler syntax. All authors, we have only one author, one page, two authors, 2 pages. We can have as many things per page, and that looks pretty good. And that, my friends, is the end of this video. I was hoping to get to this. Well, one thing we could do, well, before we end, is like what I talked about, which is in our pages, we could add a custom module, feature module for the pages. Now we did this for our bookstore, and if you notice, here's our bookstore, and let's pull up side by side here. so we can see what the feature module would look like. So if I want to make a feature module for here, let's first of all think what we're going to call this. So instead of bookstore module, we can call this pages module. We can call this partials module.ts. So let's do that. So I'll make a new file. So we'll call this pages.module.ts, and we'll make another one. Call this partials.module.ts. There we go. And let's go into the pages module.ts first. So what we need is all of this. Now, here's something to note. For the pages module, we're also going to have the model module passing in. We don't need that. Browser module we definitely need. Forms module is okay to pass through for the import, from an import perspective. We don't care about the counter directive, but let's suppose we pull all this stuff in. And instead of doing all this, because we don't need all this stuff, we don't need the model module. So let's get rid of because we're not using the model module right now. Or even the forms module is not something we're going to use. But let's suppose, I'm going to make one. The counter directive we don't need, and we don't need the bookstore component because bookstore components being taken care of somewhere else. And same thing with the counter directive and the exports, we can just kind of do like this for now. Okay. Now what we need instead of these two things is we need all the other components. We need in the pages component the about component, right? And we need the about component is what we need in there, just like we have the about. We're going to say the about component from where. And let's see if we can do that on the fly, which is something that we're hoping we can do. So we'll say the about component, right? Well, it didn't quite work, but let's see how this works. We say import about component, and we're going to say from dot slash about component. All right, so that's this part, and then we'll do the rest. So declarations we'll do in a list this time because we have a bunch of stuff to declare, right? So we'll do the next one would be the contact component, and we also want to do, we're going to fix that in a sec. We're also going to do the so about component contact, the home component. Let's try that again. Home component. Let's see if we can do that in with our styling. That's pretty cool. About contact home. Products component. Notice this little mark right here. This is what we're looking at. Woo, right here. Products component and services component. Services component. So about contact home services. What are we missing? About contact home products services. I think we got everything, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we got them all. So that kind of covers all of them, right? Services component, home, about home products services, about. Where's our contact? Oh, it's way up here. So yeah. So this one should go here. About contact home, product services component, right there. All right, so that is what's coming inbound, and just like we exported the components outbound, we need to do that here. So we need to take all this, and we need to export them in here. We declare them and we export them. Again, so what this does, it works like a pass-through. This collects all the modules, and then we export them out of here, okay? And then it says one thing that's in a bookstore module. There's not a bookstore module, but rather this is called the pages module, right? Because that's what it is. So pages module, because it can't be the bookstore module anymore. Pages module includes, this file should end with a new line. Let's fix that. That is just a linting issue. And we got this. All right, cool. So that's this part. I'm going to fix this in a sec. Let's do the same thing. Grab all this. Actually, here, we'll grab this partials module, and we'll do a split screen, and we'll do this part, pages module over here. So we want to do all of this here, but we want to call this the partials module. Partials. And we want to get rid of all this, but we're setting up properly so we can do all this right. And we don't care about all of this. There we go. So this is all good to go. And now we start declaring, we do the same thing. So we say there's two only. There's three. The base page module, so base page component, this one, followed by the footer component, this one, followed by the header component, this one. And that takes care of all the declarations for us automatically, as well as we get this nice list, which we can populate in here. And let's make sure that this is terminated correctly in the way that our little form likes. There we go. All right, cool. So we've got both of those modules now, this one and the other one. However, now we need to include them. And in my app module, we're going to have a problem because we have all these pages, header, footer, home, about, contact, products, services, base page. These are all gone, right? We don't want any of this, right? What we want instead, get rid of all this, these are declarations. What we want instead is the imports. So we want the bookstore module, and then we want the pages module, this one, and followed by the partials module, this one. And that, my friends, should take care of everything. Now, as long as order doesn't matter, we should be golden. Let's see if that works. So save. I think we saved everything and we should be good to go. Nicely, right? Did good job. All of it still works. We can still do all the, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Why is this not working? Ah, we got an error. Let's inspect. And this is what I'm saying. Sometimes you get these like really weird side effects where we're not even getting data in here anymore. So here's all authors. This is good, but the author folding stuff, we're not getting even errors for this one. So that is a problem. That is a big problem for us. Whereas before we were getting it, now suddenly we're not. So why is that? Well, let's just refresh and see what that is. Yeah. See that? That is a weird side effect. That is a weird side effect. That's not me. That is the weird side effect that we have for the number of pages that we're displaying. All right. Looks like we're okay. Actually, that's the intended behavior. Cool. So this is something that we've done. So recap, what we did was we created Pagination. We made a custom directive to clean up that ugly array problem that we had. And finally, after we did all that and displayed the data properly, we talked about how to clean up our pages and our partials by creating two feature modules, a pages module as well as a partials module. And all this does is collect all the stuff that's in these modules, and these almost like sub-modules, sub-pages. And partials is kind of a subsection as well. And instead of me passing all of these pages in directly, we pass only the modules in. And why is this good? Well, what if I want to add something else here? You know, I can make changes to the module, and it's already been imported inside my app, my root app module in here. And the root app looks much nicer, much simpler than what it looked like before, which is what we want to get to. All right, in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to start creating the shopping cart, which we want to do for our thing. And this should be one of the last videos we do for week 8. I know this was a long one, guys. Thank you for sticking around. There's some really good technology that we used here, and it's definitely a learning one. Okay, we'll see you in the next video.